What are we doing allowing kids to graduate who don't write their own papers? What is that going to lead to? Because it doesn't seem to me like anything positive.
Writing doesn't exist. It really doesn't exist. And that's because it is the end stage. It is communicating everything that's happened as the thinking.
So now everyone is just the same empty shell. You have erased what makes human beings human beings.
So all the people who are saying like, oh, we automate what we can and then focus on the personal experience. By doing that, they cheat. They cheat the outcome and that experience.
Hey, welcome to The Great Unknown, the home of Make Something Mean Something. I am Kevin Lieber. I'm not real. I am ChatGPT. And with me, as always, is Matthew Tabor.
This is such a serious topic that I'm lubing up right now. I just put chapstick on because there's this instinctive feel that sometimes you're just going to have lips flapping to such a degree. There's going to be a friction problem. You're going to heat up. It's going to be uncomfortable. So you start by applying the chapstick. The same reason that you have oil in an engine.
Right. You have chapstick on your lips. For the engine of the Create Unknown, there was controversy recently with this UCLA graduate who was bragging about using ChatGPT for all of his final projects before graduating. And this photo was taken at the graduation ceremony, and he's holding up the laptop with the ChatGPT open, I guess. And there's so much to this topic that I kind of don't even know where to start. The first thing that I thought of was, this is bad. Let's just start there. It's like, wow, this is really bad for society, for civilization, for academics, for colleges across the world. This seems bad.
What are the details here? Because there is the photo of him excitedly showing his notebook to display some, the final project that ChatGPT did instead of him doing it. But do we know anything about what kind of project it was, or really any other details on this?
Not really. I was trying to, the articles that I've found on it really are just summarizing this tweet. So, but the tweet had 220,000 likes as of 2 days ago. So it probably has more now. So it had a lot of likes, whether people were in support of the ChatGPT move, thought it was funny. I don't know what the motivation there was to like this abomination, but there were many of them. And no, it just really says that, he was bragging about it during graduation. One of the things in this article is a subheading that says AI making people dumb. A recent study by MIT scientists found that AI chatbots were making humans use their brains less. Oh, really? Gee, wonder why that's the case. While the use of chatbots enabled 60% faster completion of tasks, it also reduced germane cognitive load by 32%. The study revealed that more than 80% of ChatGPT users couldn't quote from essays they wrote minutes earlier. They wrote is not probably the best way to characterize what was written, but this is definitely the crux of the controversy, is that these students are outsourcing thinking to LLMs and getting away with it. And not only getting away with it, being rewarded for it, being lauded for it, getting to wear a tassel on their little square hat at a graduation ceremony for work that they did not do.
So I put the video in the episode chat. They put him on the Jumbotron. UCLA
Wow.
is a giant school. And so the graduation ceremonies are obviously in an arena. And as he's showing it off, they put him on the 4-sided Jumbotron. It's kind of like the one the Cowboys have in the middle of the field, but yeah, he's jumping around and people around him are, a mix of laughing and kind of like shocked that he is admitting this. I don't know. But, I wonder what's the motivation here? I wonder what he was thinking.
To show it off?
Yeah.
I guess clearly he's proud of it and thinks it's either hilarious or awesome. I mean, he's certainly being positive about, getting away with it or whatever it is. But I just wanted to say, like, can we first characterize this as not doing the work? Because the point of using the ChatGPT is to get it to do the work for you so that you don't have to, right? Like, is there any more to this than that? Isn't that like the beginning and end of even doing this in the first place? I don't want to do this, so I'll have the AI do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on what you consider the work to be. And we were talking, we were hanging out in the episode chat with everybody before we hit record, and we were, it came up like, it's sort of an issue about what is thinking, what constitutes thinking. And is it, what's the difference between, having an assistant, a research assistant? Let's say it's a scholarly thing. This is how, like in graduate school, a shocking number of professors operate this way, where research assistants will kind of do the legwork, and then, the professor, takes all of that information and writes their journal article or their book. Occasionally you'll hear a story of a disgruntled grad student who's like, oh yeah, that's basically my entire chapter. This entire chapter in a book they just lifted from my work. But is there a difference there between that, or if it's, you got a job somewhere and the people in another department or, the next rung down, they put information together and then you do the processing of that information. Is that substantially different from what this guy did with ChatGPT, where it gave him, raw information of some kind, and then he tweaked it, shaped it, probably made some cuts? I hope so. Maybe he did just push a button and just copy and paste whatever ChatGPT spit out, but he probably essentially edited, the thing. Is there a difference? If there is, what is that difference? How much does it matter? These are really big questions.
Well, one of the many problems I have with it is that, what is writing? Because to me, writing is thinking. And maybe that's just a bias that I have towards my love of writing, but I don't think so. Like, I think that in order to write, you have to be able to think clearly, and it actually helps you think clearly to be able to. I mean, one of the reasons I like doing this podcast is being forced to articulate my thoughts. Mm-hmm. It's a totally different process than just having the thoughts. There are so many thoughts that I have, floating around in my brain that I have trouble spitting out of my mouth because it's a different process entirely. You're now trying to take a mishmash, a lifetime of, little bobs and pieces that you can put together pretty cleanly yourself internally with your internal monologue, but then being asked to explain it to someone else, that's much harder. And it requires a lot of refinement of the ideas. You have to understand where to start. Like, where's your thinking on this matter? Let me start how I think about it, and then kind of build from there and create this like scaffolding of ideas. And all of this is pretty like cognitively demanding and intense, but that's the fun of thinking. So writing is just another form of that. And in my estimation, a more precise form of that. Like you have to be a lot more precise with your thoughts to be able to write them down and then have someone else read them than you do to just have a conversation. One of the criticisms that I see a lot with podcasting in general, not with ours, but with podcasting in general, is that people will misconstrue listening to podcast conversations as it being almost like a video essay where everyone is saying like very definitive conclusions about what they're trying to explain, which is not the case. A podcast is a conversation. So you will make mistakes. You will, say, misconstrue things or put things out of context or not explain them well or exaggerate things that you didn't mean to exaggerate. It's messy. That's my point, is that conversations are messy. Writing can't be messy. Like writing, the whole function of writing something is to be clean and concise and clear with your thoughts. So to me, here's the progression that I'm interested in your thoughts on. The progression is the thoughts in your brain are a total mess.
It's chaos.
Just a chaotic web of crap that is a mixture of your experiences, conversations that you've had, things that you've read. It's all smushed like oatmeal in your brain. Then the next step is having a conversation with someone to try to mold that oatmeal into something tangible so that the other person can hold on to it. And that's its own messy process. I think the final step is writing, where now you are turning that oatmeal into like a granola bar, a little snack bar that someone can eat cleanly and digest without getting a mess on their hands. You put it in a nice little wrapper that they can unwrap, at their leisure. And that's the progression of thinking. I just made that up on the spot. Does that make any sense?
It makes perfect sense. And that's actually almost exactly how I think about it and have thought about it. When I work with, the last probably 3 years, I've done a lot of work with different video content writers, and mostly young ones who are transitioning from, the writing that they mostly have done is academic, like most young people, the only writing you do is like papers in school, and then all of a sudden you have to try to write something that isn't a journal article. There's something that people actually want to read or listen to. And what you're saying, Kevin, so like I go to a further extreme on it and say what you think of as writing doesn't exist. It really doesn't exist I think barely at all. Okay. And that's because it is the end stage. It is communicating everything that's happened as the thinking. And most of when people talk about writing, they're talking about developing their thoughts as they write. Most people, when they're writing, put these two steps together. They're happening in tandem. But they're really two completely different processes. And the way I think about it, that is so similar to what you just said, is that it's like a restaurant where, to me, writing is plating the dish and somebody serves it to the customer. That's the writing part. The thinking is literally every single thing that happens before the food gets plated. And kitchens are chaotic as hell. The Bear is such a good show because you see the chaos that every individual person in that kitchen goes through. You see the difficulty of managing all the sub-processes that lead to what's on a plate. And it goes to things that are like structural. It's not just the food. It's the equipment. It's the facility. It's the accounting. It's the staffing. It's procuring. The personalities, it's the ingredients. It's procuring those in such a way that you can make a buck or at least stay in business when somebody gets that plate of food put in front of them. But the writing part is just plating and delivery. That is it. So when people talk about writing, they talk about all of it as if it's one thing. It is not. It is not. And in the text example, it's thinking. Everything that's happening before the plated food is happening in your mind with information, with how the information goes together, what it shows, what it doesn't, what you want it to communicate, which means sometimes you're making decisions, judgment calls about evidence. Not everybody's entirely intellectually honest, or they are selective about the material because they want a character to look a certain way, or they want an op-ed to make a certain point. All of this is happening in your head. The writing is just when it gets spit out, right? And obviously there has to be, these two processes have to connect like two gears for it to work properly. And those gears have to line up or you're going to have a serious problem. So they're not completely independent. But yeah, there are two things happening. And so when you have a ChatGPT, or is it fair to refer to them all as LLM? Is that the accurate way to put it? Okay.
Yeah.
If you're depending on any of those, you are accepting everything that happens in the back of the house. It just comes to you and you're only doing the plating and delivery. Well, that's not the same thing, is it? That's not the same thing at all as you going through that whole process and making all those choices along the way. You're deciding how to arrange that information.
You're just the expediter. You're not in the kitchen. You're not a chef. You're just expediting the food that someone else did all the work to make.
Yeah, but that's where you're putting 100% of your effort in that part. So this whole issue feels the same to me as the slop educational YouTubers who for years just rehashed Wikipedia articles. Now, that wasn't an LLM. That was a massive group of people curating information, but they just went through that information and tried to make it entertaining and made a video. And a lot of midwits have made good careers off of this. I love them. I'd love to just, when the Mask Off episode finally drops, it'll be 7 hours long because 6.5 of it is just going to be me listing the intellectual frauds on YouTube. But substantially, what's the difference, right? Of going to Wikipedia or going to the library and pulling paper books off the shelf and you plating the food. What's the difference between that and what's happening with AI? Conceptually, they're really similar to me. So I'm in, kind of freak out mode about this issue, but at the same time, it's kind of always existed in one form or another.
Right. I see what you're saying. Dependent upon like how closely those Wikipedia articles are just being plagiarized, it just seems to me that the overall concern that I have with this, as well as like many other things that are happening right now, just has to do with the degradation of people using their brains. Of people actually thinking and putting together a product that's of their own thoughts and their own creation, and they did the work. If you don't do that in an academic setting, when are you ever going to do that? If the schools don't care about this, well, then why should anyone? Like, if you can get away with it, and people are, if they're not doing anything to say, hey, you're not allowed to use these tools, or we have some way to identify the fraud and you'll be punished for it, then why does it matter? I mean, there was a thing that came out a few weeks ago that had to do with reading levels, where they were talking about Mississippi. Mm-hmm. The state of Mississippi had the second lowest like reading comprehension scores, like the national reading comprehension scores for, I think,
Yes.
fourth graders in all of the United States. They were ranked 49th in the country. So pretty bad. Not the
It's
worst.
crazy.
I don't know.
It's
I don't know
crazy
who was
that-
50th, but they were
50th
nudged
was-
right up against them.
There is no 50th because when you get last place, they actually make you 51st just to further shame you. So it just jumps from Mississippi to worse. They've always, well, this is unfair to say, for a long time, Mississippi has not been famous for literacy scores on things like the NAEP test. They've been in a really dismal run, and it's really kind of nutty because back in the day, some of the best writing came out of Mississippi. I mean, just godlike writing from like William Faulkner and the people who followed in his footsteps. My favorite is Shelby Foote, who, if anybody watched the PBS Ken Burns Civil War documentary series, Shelby Foote was the guy with the buttery Southern drawl, white beard, just the most engaging storyteller. It launched him into the public eye. Well, Shelby Foote was a Mississippi guy, and I love his books. And just, it's nutty to think that an area can produce so many outstanding writers, and then, they're 49th on reading. But yeah, anyway, not to derail you. Not too many opportunities to talk about specifically Mississippi authors juxtaposed with reading scores. So I had to take it.
Yeah. So they actually did something about this. Amazingly. Wow. They actually did something in order to improve their standing in terms of reading comprehension. And they instantiated a policy in which if students in fourth grade were unable to meet the criteria, the reading comprehension criteria that they set, guess what happened? They had to repeat fourth grade. They failed the grade. They got sent back, as it were, to, try again. They didn't just pass them. And lo and behold, they skyrocketed up the chart. I don't recall exactly where they land these days, but it's in the teens, I think. I think they're, 18th or something like that. They didn't skyrocket to number one. I don't think, not even breaking the top 10. But I wouldn't be surprised if a few more years, this policy allows them to break into the top 10 if the other states don't follow suit.
Yeah.
But the disturbing thing to me about that story was that other states weren't doing the same thing.
No, there's tremendous variation. Yeah.
That all of these other states were just passing kids who couldn't read up to the standards of, what a fourth grader should be able to do. They just shrug their shoulders and say, I don't know.
Get them next time. We'll get them next year. Fifth grade is going to be a banger.
Fifth grade?
Yeah.
Yeah. All of a sudden, in fifth grade, you're going to leapfrog over everybody else. Like, I doubt it. But these are the types of things that worry me. Mm-hmm. Or I'm like, what are we doing as far as the education system?
Yeah.
What are we doing passing kids who shouldn't be able to pass? What are we doing allowing kids to graduate who don't write their own papers? Like, mm-hmm. What is that going to lead to? Because it doesn't seem to me like anything positive.
Yeah.
Like, how could that not just lead to like the further degradation of the citizenry of the United States? How is there any other outcome?
This, you've really backed into a strangely apt parallel here, because the difference between tremendous differences in curriculum, not just things like, they call it social promotion. Social promotion is when you don't quite make it on the academics, but you get to move up to the next grade anyway, or you get to graduate. Social promotion is the kindest, gentlest term for what this is. So the difference in curricula, and I will keep this as brief as I can because it's probably not interesting to anybody, but oversimplifying it, there are two general approaches to literacy. And one is phonics based, and the other is what they call whole language. And whole language is it's hard to explain because it can be so many things. But it's really kind of holistic in the sense that, which is a dumb thing to say given its name. But like, you're not focusing on the composition of words and letters and sounds and that becoming meaning. It's more like making meaning overall from text. So in, let's say, first grade whole language instruction, it would be like, you've got a picture book. On the left is, Timmy filling a bucket with water. And there's a sentence about it on the right. It's like, well, try to read the sentence, whatever. But it might be like, okay, given this picture, what words do you expect to see in this sentence? So they'd say, well, there's a bucket, there's water, there's Timmy, anything that you can pull out of the picture instead of just focusing on the text and reading that text, right? Well, it doesn't teach people to read very well. It really doesn't. And because the metrics with that are so vague, it's really easy to say, okay, your performance was not exceptional in this grade. It might come together for you better next year, and we'll do more work to kind of catch you up. So it's easier to justify that social promotion. Mississippi swung their pendulum on curriculum toward that phonics style, and they improved dramatically. At this point, whole language has been used for long enough that you can get a pretty good sense of how it does and doesn't work based on the states that have committed to it. But something that fits really interestingly with the phonics side is how important raw knowledge is to reading. And E.D. Hirsch, who started it's called core knowledge, was his approach, and some schools use this. This is not the same thing at all as Common Core. It has nothing to do with it. Okay. But core knowledge, like one of the precepts on the literacy side is like, knowledge is reading. Okay. And so the more things you know about the world, the more connections you're making when you sound out a word and connect that word with a thing everybody knows water. Well, that's actually not an easy word phonics wise, right? Because the A is not normally how an A sounds in most words. Most of the time when you have vowel, consonant, vowel, that first vowel is long, but it's not waiter, right? So it's actually kind of a complex word, water. So, you're 6 years old and you're kind of struggling, sounding it out, whatever. But then it occurs to you as you're doing this process that, oh, this is water, because you know what water is. What is that poem that I know that, Kevin, you and I had to read it in school? I bet Boss Threads can pull this out. It's total nonsense. I want to say it's a Lewis Carroll thing.
Jabberwocky?
Jabberwocky, that's it. Jabberwocky. It's total nonsense. And that's kind of fun because you're completely blind to everything but the sounds of each word. You don't know anything that you're reading there. It shows you how difficult it is to read text when you don't know things about the world. You can sound it out just fine. You can read eventually with a little practice. You can read Jabberwocky perfectly, but there's no meaning there, at least not like normal words, because you don't know what any of those things are. The more you know too, usually you're hitting a word or two in a sentence that you're not familiar with. It's not all of them unless you're like 5 and just beginning to read. But then you can use that mix of context in the sentence the phonics of the word that's there and your knowledge of the world to reinforce what a word is, and then boom, you read it. And this happens close to instantly in your mind. Yeah. So anyway, that was a kind of literacy diatribe here, but that's the stuff happening in the back in the kitchen, all of that process. Whereas, the kind of whole language thing is like, oh, you're waiting to plate the food. People are just bringing you stuff. I hope the meal's good. Well, things like ChatGPT, they're bypassing that whole process for you. And people will say, well, calculators do this with math, and that's okay. Well, we're finding out that it isn't okay, actually. That yes, you can pop something in a calculator, but it's a lot better to be able to do it instantly and then focus your energy on something, whatever that next step is. I know a woman who's a very, very successful author, best-selling author, and she discovered her 8th grade son, this was years ago, couldn't calculate 10% of a restaurant bill, and pulled out his phone to do it on his phone calculator. And that is simply moving a decimal point. And when that happens, she's like, oh, we've got a problem here. We have a problem with the processes that are and aren't happening. And this needs to be an automatic thing.
Let me tell you a better story. Okay. Because I just heard this story. My mom went to the dollar store to buy some goods. To buy some goods at the dollar store. Okay. Now, the total for her dollar store purchases was $10.25. Okay.
Okay.
So you owe me $10.25. She didn't want $9.75 back. She wanted a 10.
Yeah. Oh no.
So she gave the girl, a 10 and a quarter. Or no, sorry. She gave her a 20 and a quarter so that she could get a 10 back.
Yeah.
Matt, this caused a fire drill at the dollar store.
Oh my God.
In which the cashier had no idea what to do. She had to get the manager over.
Oh no.
And explain the situation, hold up the line, hold up the entire store so that she could bring in a consultant essentially in order to determine what change to give my mom.
This is the Mr. Show change for a dollar scat, which boss threads will appreciate.
Change. Yeah. Change for a dollar. Yeah. So we're talking about, you're talking about calculating 10% on a restaurant bill.
Yeah.
This is much worse. And it was a catastrophe at the dollar store to figure out.
That's not a great thing.
No,
but you've got this cash register that is the automated way of thinking for the person, where the change pops up, $9.75, and boom. It's not a lot different conceptually than LLMs. It's a microcosm of what's happening in an LLM. And you see that disconnect where you kind of get locked into those things and have no ability to push and pull on a very basic concept because you don't even think about how it works and you don't know how it works. We saw this too. Oh man. Did I send you the video of the guy on a podcast talking about how naming time is stupid and ridiculous because when you say it's like 9:15, it's not 9:25?
Oh, no, I didn't see this. You didn't send that to me.
Yeah. So the other guy's like trying to explain to him like what the problem is.
Oh no.
And he's like, it's 25% of something. And I thought about this for way too long in the days following, like how you'd best explain it to somebody, saying that it's, 15 minutes, whatever. And the best I could come up with is like a football game is in quarters and they're 15 minutes because it's an hour of football, and they go, okay.
Right.
Yeah. Basketball is in quarters in the NBA and they're not 25-minute quarters.
Right. That'd be a long game.
Yeah. But still, it was just, not making an arithmetic leap that isn't a huge leap. It's kind of like stepping over a puddle as opposed to jumping the Grand Canyon. But that's also somebody who hasn't seen round clock faces 100 times a day like we did, and every it's checking on your phone. If you have a watch, it doesn't have hands. It's an Apple Watch or whatever. Like, no, you're not used to going through this time calculation.
I don't think they teach kids that anymore either, by the way. I
assume
think
not.
that I had read at one point that I remember distinctly learning how to read a clock in second grade. That was part of being in second grade. That was like one of the things. It was like, okay, kids, now we're going to learn how to read a clock. There was like a little paper clock with like plastic hands on it that you could hold and you could touch and you can move the hand. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Blue and white with red hands on the clock. And let me tell you how much I hated that, because when I was in second grade, I could read a sundial. We had a sundial in the yard at home. So like, I obviously could read a clock. It was like, this is stupid baby shit. It was horrible. It was horrible. It was upsetting.
But yeah, I mean, we're not going to teach kids how to read clocks, you're right. It is much harder to understand quarters and halves of an hour if you're just looking at digital all of the time. It's a different thing entirely.
Yeah, this came up 15 to 20 years ago when I was coming into my own. I did a lot of criticism of the education technology people. And if you think about, the mid to late 2000s, that's when social media was developing, collaborative websites were becoming easy to have and maintain. We'd moved past, we could do better than just simple forums. You could have like total classroom management on websites where, it's like upload a document and, everybody goes the same thing. So it was kind of this baby step toward what we have now. But the futuristic thinkers, the thought leaders, not all of them, but too many of them had a mindset that anything you can look up isn't really worth knowing because you can look it up and the whole game is processing that information. Okay. So here's an example. Today is June 20th, 2025. Now, episode chat can double check me on this, because, my memory may be flawed. I think 250 years ago today is when George Washington got his appointment to lead the Continental Army. Well, these guys would say, I don't need to know that. I look up the fact, I look up the date, whatever, and then I engage in the thought process of why he was chosen, or what the implications of him being chosen or somebody else not being chosen were. Was it the right decision? You put all of your energy into that stuff, because I can't look that stuff up. I can look up, potentially other people have weighed in on this and read about it and whatever, but the raw fact of this happened on this day, it's that like, oh, history is boring because it's just names and dates. Well, the truth is that when all of those things are automatic, when they're all automatic, you make connections very, very quickly with your thoughts. It happens instantaneously, and you are vaulted 7 or 8 steps down in the process because the dominoes have fallen in your mind in an immeasurably short period of time. That only happens when those things are automatic. Then it's I think it's easier to move on to the really important stuff, precisely because the things that the calculator can do, that the ChatGPT can feed you, whatever, are just purely automated in you all the time. They completely and totally disagreed with me on that, where it's like, no, this, to maximize human output, you let, the machines do the work. Oh, we're doing the same battle now. We're in the same battle now. And there's a point where it's really, where they're right, and a point where they're kind of wrong. Milton Friedman had a really famous encounter. It's almost apocryphal at this point, where he goes to, terrible country, socialist, communist, whatever, I forget, might have been China at the time. And there was this big construction project and a just huge mass of workers, and they were all digging this thing with shovels. He's like, why don't you have, backhoes and like skid steers and all of this modern equipment? You get this done really fast. And they're like, well, these are jobs. We want people to have jobs. And so they have shovels. And he said, well, why don't you just give them spoons then? You'd employ like 10 times the people if they all had spoons. So you don't want to get to the point where you're shoveling with a spoon for the sake of it. In that case, earth movers are a better solution. Automation is really good. Thankfully, I don't have to mow with a push reel mower. I'm very happy that I don't have to do that. And I get a lot more done and a lot faster because I've committed to automation. Well, what happens when you apply this to, thinking? It's not super, super clear. We're about to find out. And I think there's going to be a little bit of good and a lot of destruction. The funny thing to me, and this will be my end rant, is that, at least on this topic, is that the people saying like, oh, it turns out Idiocracy was a documentary, and we avoid that by being Reddit geniuses who have AI run our lives. I think that the more you have automation run your life, the faster you get to Idiocracy and the more likely you are to get there. I think they're totally wrong about it. The opposite is the case. Now I turn this over to you.
Well, one thing that you said that actually came up in a video that I watched earlier in this week about the declining literacy rates was a really interesting point that I thought I hadn't thought of before. It had to do with rote memorization. So there's been a long pushback against rote memorization in education,
especially math.
The reasons.
Yep.
Yeah. For the reasons that you stated and for the reasons that the people you were arguing with 15 years ago believed in, which was that, you don't need to just memorize dates and names and the Battle of Tippecanoe and all of that stuff because you could just look it up. But what this guy was saying was that actually, put his fedora, he put his fedora on and said, actually, that rote memorization, like you were saying, allows you to understand the world better, and that it allows you to understand what you're reading better because the dots are already in your head to connect. So he used the example of reading War and Peace. And he was saying, if you're reading War and Peace and you have no historical knowledge in terms of what that was based upon, well, then the whole thing is kind of gobbledygook. Like, you're not going to get a whole lot out of that book if you have no state of reference into what the book is about.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a fantasy, basically. So why even bother? So you can't understand what you're reading. You can't reach a sufficient level of reading comprehension if there's nothing in your brain that will allow you to comprehend what you're reading. I mean, it's like the Jabberwocky example. That's the perfect example. It all is just a bunch of nonsense, a bunch of words you never heard before.
Yeah.
One of the other things I wanted to mention about something you said earlier, as far as when you come across a word that you don't know, but the context in which you encounter that word allows you to get a pretty close estimation as to what the word meant. I've been reading these Kane novels that were written by Carl Edward Wagner.
Okay.
And it's fantasy stuff, dark fantasy. The guy, I believe he wrote like Conan stuff before that. And like Kane was his original character. It's like sword and sorcery stuff. I like it. I'm into that. You know, there's wizards and battles and heads getting chopped off, and
Sounds
it's
awesome.
violent. I like it. It's good. It's good stuff. It should be better well known. Those books are out of print and they're expensive to buy now. Luckily, I got a collection of them, of the novels, years ago for only $90. They're like $300 now. Anyway, coruscant was a word that he kept using in this book. And I was like, I had never heard this word coruscant, but you know, he was using it to describe something shining.
Oh, we talked about this.
Yeah, because I liked the word. So I wanted to talk to you about this word coruscanting. But I knew what he was talking about because it was in the context of like a glowing sword.
Right.
And it means glittering or sparkling. If you look up coruscant, it means glittering, sparkling. It's a cool word.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you mentioned that, you know, that's why, that has to be why the center of the government in the Star Wars universe is Coruscant. That you'd have, it's sort of like naming a place Providence. You know, there are a lot of you know, kind of shining city on the hill type things for, you know, important center of places. And what a wonderful name to give the gleaming, glittering hope of space humanity, than repurposing this, you know, this word and calling that city Coruscant. Like that, it makes everything better. And this is what the midwits don't realize because they've never felt better. They've never felt this in a meaningful way. How much more enjoyable, how much deeper you understand something when you have the Coruscant one is pretty fringe. Like that's a word that I don't know if I've ever naturally encountered it in text. But there are a lot of these things where, let's talk about the like giving a $10 bill back from 2025 level understanding about the world, where you get that much more enjoyment out of the thing when you have this storehouse of connections to make. You know, otherwise you're kind of parroting stuff. You're parroting stuff without any sense of what it means. You're reciting Jabberwocky, you know, and there's a place for it in the world. Like, you know, I've talked to you a lot and probably too many people, lately about repairing different machines. I can do those repairs without necessarily understanding what I'm repairing and how that works. Especially now, like, you can see a broken part. You can pop that into YouTube and have somebody show you on video how to put the new part in. And that's okay. Your thing works again. And it was very quick and efficient. But it's a lot better and cheaper in the end to know how different mechanisms are working. You know, I just mentioned this with the starter assembly on a brush cutter, where now that I know how each of the pieces interacts with one another, I've got a problem that is fixed with a 2-cent bolt that I may have to like shape for 5 minutes. I may have to adjust that. As opposed to buying the actual part for, if it's, a proper OEM one, $100 plus or minus. Well, when I didn't know how those pieces interacted, I drop $100. Now that I do know how those pieces interact, I drop 2 cents. One of these is better than the other. I want to go to what VibeCat has said, because this is the next phase here. This is how it really matters. The first thing is he's got his own example here. He said, we've got a high schooler and a college sophomore doing a project in our lab for the summer, and they were making presentations. They didn't know how to use a flash drive to copy over their files. That's like plus or minus 20 years old. Well, a high schooler isn't, but so let's say 18 plus and minus 2 years. Flash drive? Is it that old?
It's not that old. No, it's not that old. We certainly didn't have flash drives in high school. That's for sure. I remember zip drives.
Yeah.
I don't know when flash drives came out.
I had a jazz drive
because they weren't cheap.
I mean,
even if they existed,
yeah,
they weren't prevalent.
That's one of those making change moments, though. Like, you'd think it's so basic, and I assume it held up. It held up their presentation and probably made them look bad, made everybody over the age of 6 in the room laugh at them in their heads. And now they're on a podcast. So good job, guys. But anyway, he made a point way back, and I tagged you in this, Kevin, to say we've got to return to this. When we were talking about school stuff, VibeCat says maybe make oral presentations more of a thing. There's a bigger point in that there is constant human interaction in which you can't look anything up. Okay. Every first date, you need to just talk and use the things that are in your head to have that conversation and be a person that the other person likes spending time with and likes talking to. You can't look up every bit of knowledge online, even though it's possible to. When people say that you can rely on the AI, you can rely on the automation, the Wikipedia, all the way down to the mundane older stuff, they're completely ignoring the fact that you have to interface with other humans without a screen. And we're going to hit a point where we're not all that far, given what, Meta has done, stuff like that, where you'll have like a heads up display on lenses and glasses that will show you what you need to know. And you'll have access to that. But generally you have to talk to people. Well,
what if the Meta glasses are telling you what to say? What if the Meta glasses have a ChatGPT that says, okay, tell the girl this now. Tell her that you like her hair. You're just following all of the prompts.
Yeah. Where does that lead? It may lead to a wonderful first and second and third and whatever dates. And then eventually, when you're not in a situation where Meta glasses are guiding you, unfortunately, then both of you are operating on your own personalities, and it probably, the training wheels are off at that point. And I think that's one of those like ... hilarity ensues moments. It's probably going to go really, really badly. But if you depend on all of this stuff, and the people who use it are going to say, no, this isn't what my life is like. No, I just use this for work. I just use this, for papers. Like, I don't do like AI to guide my life. The hell you don't. When you're using it for those things, you simply don't know this stuff, and you're limited to things that everybody else knows. Like, I think of like subreddits where it's something like Andor TV show that a lot of people have watched. Well, it's cool when you meet somebody who likes the same shows as you. You both watched Andor and you talk about Andor. Like, okay, as soon as you deviate from that topic, well, you have to rely on whatever knowledge is just like there? What's already there?
Well, what if there's nothing there? That's what I started thinking about with the glasses thing. You know, the further we
Yeah.
get down the road of everybody outsourcing their thoughts to AI, completely flattens everyone.
Yes.
So, you know, maybe it's not even awkward when the ChatGPT eyeglasses come off because both people are at the same level of just being an empty shell of a human
Yeah.
being with nothing to say. So
Right.
now everyone is just the same empty shell, and you
They're
have
a husk.
erased, you have erased what makes human beings human beings. Like
That's right.
that is like the sci-fi ending. It's the
Yep.
Black Mirror episode of what we're talking about, where there's nothing left that makes anyone different or interesting because
Yes.
everyone is just jacking in to the ChatGPT personality
Yeah.
that
Boss
is
Dredd
available
says,
to them all.
yeah, Boss Dredd says you become a meat suit for AI, and like both of us and everybody listening to this has met people who pretty much all they have to offer is kind of talking about something in pop culture. It's like if they just consume media all day, and if they're not talking about the media they consume, there's nothing else for them to talk about. So this is like the first baby step toward becoming a husk, a meat suit for AI. Uh, you've got to know as much as you can. And I mean, it seems like a stupid thing to say, but it's not. It's really not, because it used to be obvious, and now you actually have to work. You have to work against easy mode to really actually be an interesting and original person. Yeah, I see this when I talk to younger people. I'm sorry to take a dump on you as a generation, but occasionally you encounter one where there's just not a lot there. Once you take away the interests and hobbies, they know virtually nothing about the world. And when they do, it is about 100% about their feelings about the world, or like their point of view on it, not actually what's happening in the world. And you see this in videos on both sides of kind of the political aisle, the man on the street type things where, somebody's like, oh, you're waving this, free Palestine sign, what can you tell me about Gaza? And they ask this really basic question, and the person's like, I don't know. But, and it does go on both sides with that kind of thing. So when they do think they know something, it's only their response to the thing. They can't very often sit and have a real discussion about it because they don't know enough to do that.
No, they're just wearing a sticker. They put a sticker on their shirt.
Yeah.
What's this? What do you know about the sticker? I don't know anything about the sticker. I just like the sticker. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what happens when, you skip that process of knowing about a thing internally and then comparing what you know to what everybody else knows, to a changing reality, to finding out even more things. That's interesting. It feels good. It makes you an interesting person. It makes you a valuable person, because what you're coming up with is not what anybody else is coming up with. It's never going to be exactly the same because you're working on your knowledge and your experience. So all the people who are saying oh, we automate what we can and then focus on the personal experience. By doing that, they cheat. They cheat the outcome and that experience. If they really want to push that, they should be going with the knowledge amassing and absorbing and mastery that really allows you to be kind of awesome at life. It's an overstatement, but it's true. You'll be useful.
Well, and it'll become increasingly rare, I think, if people actually have interesting things to talk about or actually stand out. If everyone else is just taking that easy mode that you mentioned and outsourcing all of this stuff, then there's just going to be a lot of it's going to be like a world of NPCs.
Yes.
Is really like what we're talking about is like, what will the world be like when every single person is an NPC?
Yes. It's a singularity of emptiness.
Well, that sounds boring.
Yeah. It's a giant void.
There are two things that I wanted to say about this topic. One is that going back to the making the change or reading a clock or whatever it is that when we try to think about like, okay, what's the problem with this? Like, why is this a big deal? You know, if everybody's at the same level and everybody's doing the same things, as far as relying upon AI, then what does it matter? And I think it matters tremendously just to the confusion of everyone. Like the girl who couldn't make the change was confused.
I feel very bad.
That's a horrible place to be when you just are unable to determine what to do next with a very simple scenario.
Yeah, it's easy to knock that person or Vibecat's flash drive, what's the right, would it be a Three Stooges reference? You know, it's sort of like the Keystone Copish, whatever is happening with this flash drive. It's funny, it's easy to look at that and just be like, oh, what a bunch of boners. They didn't know that. But no, actually, the decent human response to these situations is, I feel terrible that they're in this position. I feel terrible that this girl couldn't just make change. It's really unfortunate that she's put into that position because I'm sure it embarrassed her. The confusion sucks. The frustration sucks. It sucks for everybody.
The world just must be so confusing. Like very simple things that we would take for granted, just throw people for a loop. So unless we get to a point where all of this stuff, you just ask your AI assistant and it'll explain to you what, 2:15 means and why it's called that. I don't know. But the other thing that I wanted to mention just had to do with the topic of humans being interesting and not everything being in AI. So, or it couldn't possibly be in AI. The stuff that will stand out as being interesting about humanity and about other people and the world that we're living in. I have I don't know if I've said this in the podcast, but one of my rants for years when I've talked to people about YouTube and, making content and how do you get your ideas and all of this stuff, has been that not a lot is actually on the internet.
Yes.
There's like you think, and I really imagine that everyone who grew up with the internet and grew up, more specifically with smartphones, they just think it's all online. Like that the Library of Alexandria times a million is here and it's your phone. Mm-hmm. And there isn't anything that has ever existed or has been known or the people in the world and what they were like that isn't available at your fingertips. And the reality there is that it is like less than a dusting of all of the things that are known or have happened or exist are actually on the internet. It's like nothing. It's a pathetic, tiny, 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 tiny sliver that's online. So in reference to YouTube, like that has always been my answer. Is like there is an endless amount of fascinating things that you can make YouTube videos about that's not online yet, that nobody knows because all they know is the stuff that they see on the internet and they don't know the stuff that's not, which is way a much higher pile of stuff than the stuff that's actually on the internet. But you were mentioning before we started recording human quirks, because that's something that we've talked about on the podcast before is like you and I are both, I think, uniquely interested in, I don't know, human foibles. Like when you tell me,
what makes every snowflake individual and unique.
That's right. That's right. Whether it's, your brother being obsessed with hot dog stands or, a popcorn maker and how to make the perfect caramel corn and all of it, like whatever it is.
I sent him a video last night, by the way, of somebody making popcorn in an excavator bucket.
What?
Yeah. Like they made like 30 gallons of popcorn. They ended up dumping it in 5-gallon buckets and using like a pesticide sprayer to spray butter on it. It was amazing, but I knew he'd get a kick out of it.
Heat it?
I don't remember. Huh. It may have been just hot enough from being in the sun. You know, the bucket's like raw metal.
Right.
But yeah, when there's hot dog content, when there's popcorn content, golf ball cleaning and discovering content, or jarts content, yeah, I say, I send it to him, and that's good.
But one of the many complaints that I have with modern media is that the characters have no foibles. Like the characters in so many of these shows and movies they're just cookie cutter. They could be replaced by anyone else. There's nothing unique about them.
Yeah.
There's nothing memorable about them. They don't have quirks. Not really. Like the quirks that they have are extremely surface level. We're like, oh, well, this character's the nerd and this character's the tough guy. And it's like, okay, but what does the tough guy do that's unique, that makes him unique as a tough guy? Nothing? Okay, well, I'm bored.
It's forgettable.
One of the funny things about Columbo that I love, I'm going to go back to Columbo, is that almost every episode, there's some inane subplot that tells you about Columbo. So, for example, there was an episode the other night where, Columbo has a very iconic trench coat, like raincoat that he wears over his
like
suit.
Beige, right? He always has the same kind of like khaki colored trench coat.
Yes. It's beige. It's way too big for him. It's kind of like wrinkly and a mess, and he's kind of swimming in it. Like there's elements of that big raincoat that he wears that tell you about his personality. They tell you he's just kind of a gruff, blue collar, sort of a mess kind of guy that just so happens to be a brilliant detective. It's part of what makes him an interesting character. Anyway, there was a subplot where his wife got him a new raincoat.
Oh, no.
Because that's what a wife would do. They would see some ratty old raincoat for their husband, and for his birthday, let me get you a nice one, Columbo.
Oh, he's going to love it.
For your birthday, I'm going to get you the finest, like well-tailored, beautiful raincoat. You wear a raincoat every day. I love you, and this is my gift to you, a new raincoat. He hates the new raincoat. Like that's part of the subplot is it's too tight. It's restrictive. He's used to this like oversized flowing thing, and it fits him too well. Mm-hmm. He feels like he can't move around in it. He can't think in this raincoat. This has nothing to do with the plot. It has nothing to do. It doesn't help him solve the murder. It's not like he puts on his old raincoat and all of a sudden he cracks the case. It is irrelevant to the episode, except for the fact that it's funny and enjoyable and tells you more about Columbo.
Yeah.
That's it. That's its purpose. And that's what it serves in the story.
Yeah.
And those are the nuggets that make people interesting. They make characters interesting. And this has been like erased more or less from media. And this is what I really worry about being erased from this topic of AI taking over for thinking for everybody.
Yeah.
So you were telling before we were recording this story about this guy that you know who rides a bike up and down this country road.
Yep.
Feverishly searching for some invasive plant species so that he can uproot it.
Yep.
And toss it in the middle of the road.
Right on the center line.
So right on the center line, so it can dry out and die and
get
not
run
procreate.
over a lot. Yeah. So, because it's so invasive and spreads so easily that you have to completely obliterate the thing. And I guess the options would be like you'd have a bag, like a shoulder bag maybe, that he tosses a plant in so he can go and like just collect them all and then destroy it.
He's the opposite of Johnny Appleseed.
Yeah, that's right. He's Johnny Appleseed, but just like the sort of enemy Captain Planet would have. Boss Threads asks if it's not wood. I looked that up. No, it's not. No, so it's yellow. It's yellow, and it actually looks kind of cool, but it takes over. It completely takes over and spreads, and it's a Herculean effort. It would be, this is the sort of thing you can say when you don't have to look every single thing up. You'd say Herculean because it's the sort of thing that could have been one of the 12 labors of Hercules, like cleaning the Augean stables. It's that level of task. Eradicating this plant, whatever it's called, from the hill that he lives on. But I want to point out, this story is better than you think. And there's zero chance of anybody who knows this guy listening to this podcast. But I still want to say everything that I'm saying is praise. It is lovable. I'm not making fun of him. Okay. So like the single speed bikes, he has a barn full of them. And when I say full, it's all up the walls. They're all hanging like layered on the walls up to like 15 feet high. I bet there are 100 bikes in there of that same model. He likes the bikes. I think it's cool.
I guess so. That's an understatement.
Yeah, he's been, procuring them for as long as I've been alive, really. Every once in a while. At least when I was a kid, the barn door would be open. You know, you drive by and you see all the bikes on the wall. It's like, damn, that's a lot of old bikes. So he's even, quirkier in that way, individual, unique guy. So yeah, he must choose one of those bikes, strolls through. He looks at everything, everybody. He could tell me, when and who in my family planted certain trees going back 5 generations. That's how well he knows this hill.
Wow.
But yeah, it's cool. He, has done a great job eradicating that yellow garbage. I don't see it very often around the hill. I see it in lesser parts of the world. I'll drive to other towns and see an infestation. And I'm like, they don't have David, do they? You can tell that when a town doesn't have a David looking out for you. But that's enjoyable. It's awesome. What makes me like talking to him,
but there's a better David story with the restaurant. This is a better David story.
Yeah. There's one restaurant, in the village of the town I live in. There is only one. Okay. And a simple dinerish kind of place. And yeah, I guess he came in there every day, breakfast there every single day, and for years. And then, the guy raised prices by $1. This is the restaurateur, his claim. Raised prices by $1, and the guy stopped coming in, never came in again. It's like, I don't know if he chose to go somewhere else, or eat at home. I don't know. I'll ask him when I see him next. But what's the process, right? Where a person sees the $1 more, what makes them decide I'm done here? Is it like a general slight? Is it a calculation of like, okay, this is $350 more I'll be spending this year? I don't know. But there's a general thing too. My great uncle, whose nickname was Bohunk, by the way.
Bohunk.
That's right. Is that one you encountered in Pennsylvania? The Hungarians especially were called Bohunk as a pejorative.
I've never known a Bohunk. I wish I did.
Yeah, it was pejorative. If you describe somebody as Bohunk, they're like dumb Hungarian laborer of the yesteryear.
Okay.
I don't know how he got it, but anyway, he ate every single morning at the diner in Cooperstown, the little one. Every single morning of his life, he went there and got, coffee and whatever. One of my uncles did the same thing every single morning. Another uncle went to a gas station every single morning and sat and had coffee and, jawed with the boys and this and that. That's its own unique, interesting thing. I can't name anybody in like our generation who does that.
Me either.
I know it's a habit for some people to go to Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, whatever, as part of their like going to work routine. But that's a different thing to me. That feels different.
Yeah, it's not, I'm just guessing, but I would imagine the majority of those people aren't sitting down and jawing with the boys. It's really kind of like it's like a barber shop situation is what you're talking about with your uncles. It's a very like barbershop to me, where it's a gathering place. It's a social place. Getting drive-through at Starbucks is not even in the same universe as that. That's just consuming.
Yeah. I know that Kevin likes hot dogs. And so that's, when I get interesting hot dog content, I send it to him too. I just sent him really interesting hot dog content in a DM. But I was trying to get him to break on camera, and he's too good. You can't, any normal person would have lost it at this, but when you send it to like the YouTube professional who's made a life of being good on camera, you can't crack. He doesn't crack.
It's a tattoo of a hot dog that looks like a body part.
It's a mix, isn't it, of anatomy and a hot dog but the bun is still there too. Like it's in a real bun.
You're derailing the podcast with these obscene tattoos of hot dog anatomy mashups.
This
one's a corn dog.
Yeah, there's way more in the world than you would think.
There shouldn't be. There should be zero. There should be. If there's one, it's one more than there should be. We don't need one.
Well, there's a really hopeful element to all of this, and like this is where I go in the end on it. This I think is the best opportunity that people who know this situation will ever have. And I do think it's probably the best opportunity in human history, where everybody else is going to down the road that leads to NPC/empty husk. The value of people who know about the world and who know about other people, how they live, what they're like, what individual humans are like, what groups of humans are like, what places are like, actually know. And this is not reading Wikipedia articles. It's engaging with the world and having direct experience with it. The value of that is it's already skyrocketing. It is it's to the moon. Anything that the aggressive Bitcoin people say about Bitcoin is applied to this times 1,000. You're in a position, if you commit to humans to be valuable, unique, useful, you'll have a pretty good time doing it for the most part. There are bad times, but generally it'll be very good. This opportunity is just amazing. And I'm so lucky that that it was built into how I was brought up and, the way I live and all of that stuff. I stumbled into it by accident, but I see how much easier things are for me now, where I can do things that the people who don't have that knowledge can't do. They just can't. They can't make the same connections. They can't process the situations the same way. When they do, it's often very wrong. It's not their fault at all, but they're not working with that kind of store of knowledge. One reason I don't ever engage in discussions on a place like Twitter, anything, it seems that Israel is in the news at this point. Something's happening over there, has been for a little while. I stay out of that completely because I've spent so much time there. I spent a couple years there, and I have, it's not like I'm the world's expert on anything, but I have direct experience to go with. And I simply do not want to talk to anybody, even if they agree with me 100%. I don't really want to talk to anybody about it when they've learned it like an academic subject, right? I just don't find it interesting. It's boring to me. They're boring to me. Anyway, if you want the fast track, well, slow track, but ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, fast track to pretty much being in a really good place professionally, personally, all of this, you need to do all of the things that the world is telling you to do less of now. And I don't want to be that guy that's like, actually the opposite is true. But no, I really believe that the more things get AI and automated and whatever, the value of engaging with people and reality goes up much, much more. ChatGPT, anybody anywhere in the world can use an LLM to write a pretty good essay about the Battle of Gettysburg. That means a reasonably capable person in Bangalore can do it. You can do it, Kevin. Anybody anywhere in the world can do it. So, what's the unique offering that, any of those people have? Well, Kevin, we were talking about this last week about the geography in lower Pennsylvania. I just drove through there, probably 20 minutes from Gettysburg, and it's very, very flat and open in a way that the middle and north and all the way up into central New York is not. You can see how very large armies on the scale of 100,000 people, all their supplies, everything, could move in terrain of that kind. You simply could move faster than if they were trying to do the same thing in, like, the Mohawk Valley of New York. Well, that was a place where armies moved in the Revolution. They were much, much smaller. If they'd had 50,000 in one army, it would have been logistically very, very difficult. Well, anyway, that's just from driving through a place. Like, oh, that's really flat, And I'd been there as a kid, but I wasn't thinking about terrain and geography when I was like 9. I was like, oh, that cannon is cool. So doing things at different times helps. But I can have this conversation with anybody who's talking about, Gettysburg. Whereas if I'm, and suckling at the teat of AI for everything that I know, I'm just spitting out facts and bullshit that everybody else can know. Well, when you talked about people not being, or a lot of things not being online, a lot of information not being on the internet, I think that less than 1% of humanity is reflected in all of the content that LLMs are learning from. They're only as good as the information being fed into them. I think of my family, where there is no information available on even my parents' generation, what they were like, my grandparents, my great-grandparents. There is nothing to be fed into any LLM ever. It simply does not exist anywhere. A few factual things do, but nothing about them, their life, how they lived, why they did this, how they responded to different crises of all sorts. It will never be a part of AI because there's nothing to put into the system. The whole world is like this. I'm talking about a modernized, well-documented whatever. 1930 in New York State, people had a better bead on that than 1930 in Namibia. So think of all the things that simply do not exist to be put into any of these models. Well, there's one way around this, and that is for you to know it, to find the people, talk to the people, go to the places, read the books so that, your experience there is even better. And you will be doing something that no machine will ever, ever, ever be able to do. It literally is not possible to get that information from the past because the past is gone. And there's no evidence of it. but you can know the people right now. If you do that, you are set for life. You are absolutely set for life. You know, we keep stumbling on these things, and it is so much simpler than anybody is telling you. If you talk to people and make a sandwich, okay, we've got two things that you're set for life. And if you start this at like 22, you will be 45 years old and a millionaire, and you'll be very happy doing it. You know, when we talk about podcast topics and when I think about videos for different entities, it's getting harder and harder because I increasingly realize that like this stuff there's not a lot to it. Talk to people and make a sandwich. You know, there's more than that. I bet there's 10, but like Jesus Christ, that's the cheat code to everything. Anyway, it's a tremendous opportunity. If you don't do this, you're blowing it. You're blowing it. You know, there's a reason why the people who gravitate toward this podcast, this is a funny thing. Everything we're saying, virtually nobody listening to this needs to hear it because this is how they already operate. They're curious about the world. They're curious about people. They put the work in. The people we know in real life are a lot like us. That's why we have good conversations with them and good friendships with them and all this. So it's not like we're converting anybody today, you know, but it's more of a reinforcement that this is the way to do things. It's going to be awesome. And everybody else is going to be pretty miserable. Imagine 40 years from now, if all you do is just take instructions from the computer and you consult the computer on knowing anything. You're just NPC, like you said.
Yeah, those are your options. Become an NPC or become a human. The choice is yours, but you have to make those choices. Before we go, there's something really important that Mr. Weir, listening to the podcast, dropped in the episode chat in regards to what we were talking about with the education system and students relying upon AI instead of thinking for themselves. He mentioned that you're going to start seeing proctored in-person writing activities that utilize lockdown browser platforms. There are already professors starting to implement this. So changes are coming to this. I think that he just sent me the worst. I don't even know what I'm looking at, but it is another phallic tattoo where there's like a dinosaur head. Okay.
I can't believe these things exist. I don't
want to know what your browser history looks like. Talking about
I searched
browsers.
one term to get all of these. That's all it took. Like the internet's full of horrible things.
Yeah, it is.
Nobody ever told me.
So anyway, yeah, changes are definitely coming, but changes have to occur or else brains will just be made obsolete. Yeah. That is what, that is the impending crisis that we're talking about. But I really wanted to end on your monologue because it was excellent, but I had to throw that in there because it's important to recognize that stuff is happening surrounding this topic to try to prevent the total collapse of thinking and permanent brain rot class of human citizens. We're out of here. Thank you for listening. Thank you to all of our patrons for hanging out in the Discord while we record this podcast. And thank you to all of our patrons who help support and make this podcast happen. If you want to do that, go to Patreon, look up the Create Unknown. You'll find us. We're there. And we'll be back next week. Until then, see you, Space Cowboys.
Thanks for listening to The Create Unknown. We make this show with the support of our patrons. 100% of that goes directly to keeping episodes going every week. And the recent support has been amazing. Sidpoke, NRM, Venture Addicts, Weezer Good, you all really do make this show happen. Thank you to the Tots and the Dumpster crew, old and new, who save tiny little lives every month. And thank you to our grizzled, battle-hardened child infantry. Clemente de los Santos, Dan the Latch, Demetrius Andrews, Erica, Ferrycoon, Jen Mafasanti, Kevin Menard, Mikhail Steinke, Monahim, Natsu, Penny Piddler, Ryan Steer, Ryan Kinder, Samuel Manser, Sean S., Sean Malone, and Tom Bidiover. And a tremendous shout-out to our elite baby gang commanders. Atrocious Scuff, Kat, Dojangles, Graham Robertson, James Gallagher, Jeff Davis, Orange Vanilla Coke, Patrick Pister, TCU's personal pilot, Andy, Ryan Carroll, Baseweight Vintos, Yeetus Deletus, Jonas Walter, Nathan Robinson, and of course, Trev Stead. You are the elite. Thank you as well to our indentured servants, producer, editor Ben Webster, Minecraft mogul Laterman, Discord kitten wrangler Conrad, and producer emeritus Dan Yosua. Thanks to Baseweight for use of Created in the Unknown for the opening theme. Thanks to Electro Voice for giving us mics to sound good on top of it, and thanks to Main Gear for powering all our PC endeavors. The Create Unknown is an Unknown Media production in partnership with Studio 71.